It was almost midnight when Rachel heard the pounding. Not from the thunder outside. No, this was different. Closer. Someone was at the door. She froze. Rainwater was already seeping through the front steps. Through the window, she saw him, soaked, panicked, banging with his fist. A complete stranger, and in her arms her daughter slept feverish, unaware that their lives were about to change. The rain had started around noon, but by nightfall it had become something else, merciless. The kind of storm that turned streets into rivers and prayers into whispers. Rachel sat on the floor of her living room, holding a wet towel against her daughter's forehead. Lila had a fever. There was no medicine left, and the nearest clinic had flooded hours ago. She'd already moved everything she could onto the couch, school books, food, her worn-out purse. There was no electricity, no signal, just water rising. So when the knock came, it didn't sound like danger. It sounded like another decision she couldn't afford to get wrong. Let him in or keep the door shut. This is the story of how a woman with nothing left opened her door to a stranger and discovered something even she no longer believed in. But that night, Rachel had no idea what or who was really asking to come in. Most mornings, Rachel Mendez woke up before the sun. She'd slip into her navy blue uniform, 2 sizes too big, and quietly pack lunch for her daughter. A peanut butter sandwich if they had bread, a banana if the neighbor had extras. By 6:30, they were at the bus stop. Rachel would kiss Lila on the forehead and send her into the gates of Crestmont Academy, the same school she cleaned 5 nights a week. Students there wore designer shoes. Rachel wore soles patched with tape. Still, she smiled, always smiled, because Lila was watching. But that day, everything had started to unravel. The school had closed early because of flood warnings, forcing Rachel to leave work unfinished and without pay. She'd run across half the city carrying Lila, drenched and coughing, to reach home before the streets became rivers. Inside their small rental house, Rachel laid out towels to catch the leaks from the ceiling. The power flickered. Her prepaid phone had no signal. And the medicine? Gone with the last paycheck. She tried not to panic, but the fever in Lila's body burned like a warning. Rachel sat at the kitchen table, staring at the last bill. Past due, rent, utilities, all printed in red. She looked at the ceiling. God, she whispered, I don't need a miracle, just a little help, just enough to get us through tonight. Then came the sound, a crash of thunder, followed by knocking. Lila stirred in the bedroom. Rachel stood slowly, her body aching, her mind racing. She peeked through the curtain. A man, soaked, holding something tight against his chest, eyes wide, terrified. She didn't recognize him, but something about the way he looked at the house, like it was his only chance, shook her. For a second, she just stood there, hand hovering over the doorknob. Letting someone in could mean danger, but doing nothing could mean watching someone drown. And it was there, in the silence between fear and mercy, that Rachel made the choice that would change everything. Rachel always believed she'd find a way out, not just out of debt or temporary hardship, but out of this whole fragile existence. She'd been studying quietly for months, using old community college textbooks she found at a thrift store. She wanted to become a teaching assistant. She loved children, loved learning, and if she could land that job, it would mean more time with Lila, and maybe enough money to stop counting cents. The exam had been last week. She hadn't told anyone, not even Lila. She didn't want to get her daughter's hopes up. That afternoon, the email came through, before the power died. We regret to inform you. Rachel closed the message before finishing it. It wasn't just a rejection. It was another crack in a foundation she had fought so hard to build. She sat on the floor with her back against the fridge, the hum of the motor sputtering as the electricity faded completely. The rain hadn't stopped for 12 hours, and now the water was rising. She moved Lila's mattress to the center of the house and piled cushions around it like a fort. It's just for fun, she told her. But Lila's face was pale, and her breaths came shallow. Rachel placed a wet cloth on her forehead and tried not to cry. Suddenly, A roar from outside, a car's horn, then silence, then shouting. She rushed to the window. A man, his car half submerged, lights blinking. He was struggling, limping through knee-high water toward her house. He was shouting, but the storm swallowed every word. Instinct told her to stay inside, to lock the door. But something deeper, a voice she hadn't heard in years, said, "Look again." He stumbled toward the porch. His foot slipped. He dropped to his knees. Without thinking, Rachel grabbed her flashlight and opened the door. "Hey!" she shouted over the wind. "Come this way! Hurry!" He looked up, startled, eyes glassy, then nodded. She stepped into the flood, her shoes immediately soaked, and reached out her hand. His grip was trembling, strong, but shaken. He held onto her like she was the last solid thing in the world. By the time they reached the porch, both were soaked and breathless. He collapsed into the doorway, coughing, drenched, trying to speak. She shut the door behind him, unsure of who exactly she had just invited into her home. But deep down, a part of her already knew. This wasn't just someone lost in a storm. Something about him was about to break everything she thought she understood. She gave him a towel, but he didn't take it at first. He just sat there, soaked, his arms wrapped around something wrapped in a plastic bag. Rachel glanced at Lila. Still sleeping, shallow breath, cheeks flushed. "Bathroom's through there," she said quietly. "There's a first aid kit, if you're hurt." He finally nodded. "Thank you." His voice was low, hoarse, like he hadn't used it in days. A few minutes later, he came back wearing one of her late brother's old shirts. It hung awkwardly on him, but he didn't seem to care. He looked lost. She didn't ask questions, not yet. He didn't offer explanations. They sat across the room from each other, the only light coming from a candle flickering on the kitchen counter. The rain hadn't let up. It pounded the windows like a warning. "Name's Nathan," he said at last. Rachel nodded. "Rachel, and that's Lila, my daughter." "She okay?" Rachel looked toward the bedroom. "I don't know," she said. "Fever won't break. No meds, no clinic." Nathan didn't say anything. He just pulled the plastic bundle into his lap and started unwrapping it. Inside was a photograph, warped from water but still visible. A woman and a little boy, both laughing, frozen in time. Rachel's eyes lingered on it, but she didn't ask. Nathan noticed. "My wife. My son." Rachel froze. The quiet that followed was heavy. "They died," he said, barely above a whisper. "2 years ago. Drunk driver. Wrong lane. I was supposed to be there too. I was late." He swallowed hard. "I haven't really been anywhere since." Rachel didn't know what to say. Her instinct was always to fix, to clean, to make things better. But grief wasn't something you could mop up. Nathan leaned forward. "I didn't mean to end up here. I was driving, just driving. I didn't care where. Then the water hit. I panicked. Your porch light, and it was the only one I saw." Rachel looked down at her hands. They were trembling. Not out of fear, out of something she didn't want to name. "I almost didn't open the door," she admitted. Nathan looked at her, not surprised, not offended. "I wouldn't have blamed you." For the next hour, they didn't speak much. Rachel changed the towel on Lila's forehead. Nathan fixed the curtain that had fallen from the wind. She offered him leftover rice. He accepted with a quiet "thank you." Somewhere after midnight, Rachel walked into the living room and found Nathan asleep on the floor, curled around that photo like it was the only thing keeping him together. And for the first time, she saw him not as a stranger, but as a man drowning in a different kind of flood. She stood there for a long moment, watching him breathe. Then she whispered, "To no one. I prayed for help tonight." And the candle flickered, like maybe someone was listening. Rachel woke to the smell of something faint but warm. Not smoke, not rain, coffee. She sat up, disoriented. For a moment, the storm felt like a dream. Then she saw Nathan in the kitchen, awkwardly pouring hot water through a makeshift coffee filter made of paper towels. The power was still out, but he'd somehow gotten the gas stove to light. The window was cracked open, letting in the morning grey. He looked up when he saw her. "Sorry," he said. I didn't want to wake you. Thought maybe some coffee would help. Rachel stared at him. A stranger, barefoot, wearing her brother's shirt, making coffee like he belonged there. And somehow, it didn't feel wrong. She nodded slowly. Thanks. He poured 2 cups, uneven, messy, and brought one to her. It was too hot, too bitter, slightly burnt. But it was the best thing she'd tasted in weeks. They sat in silence, sipping, listening to the sound of water dripping from the ceiling into a plastic bucket. Nathan broke the silence first. I used to think I needed a restart, he said, but now I'm starting to wonder if I needed a return. Rachel tilted her head. To what? He thought for a moment. To people, to real life. I forgot what a real house sounds like, what it feels like to make something with your own hands, even if it's just bad coffee. Rachel laughed softly. It surprised them both. He smiled, gently. There it is. She shook her head. It's just been a long time since anyone made anything for me. Nathan looked down at his cup. Well, maybe it's time someone did. For a moment, the storm outside didn't matter. The past didn't matter. There was a man in her kitchen who didn't owe her anything, but chose to stay. There was coffee on the table, and her daughter in the next room breathing steadily. Rachel didn't know where this was going, didn't know if he'd leave once the flood cleared. But in that moment, with the candlelight flickering and the coffee warming her hands, one thing became clear. For the first time in years, she wanted someone to stay. The rain had finally slowed by noon. Outside, the street looked like a shallow river, debris scattered everywhere. But inside the little house, something had shifted. Nathan stayed. He offered to fix the back door, which had come off its hinge. He helped Rachel mop the floor, moving furniture with a quiet diligence that made her nervous and grateful. Later, he sat on the floor with Lila, who was finally well enough to sit up. He showed her how to fold paper into tiny houses, told her stories about buildings shaped like flowers and museums shaped like ships. You're an architect? Rachel asked, surprised. Used to be, he replied. There was no pride in his voice, just memory. That night they cooked together. She made rice and beans. He tried to cut onions and failed miserably. You're dangerous with a knife, she teased. Tell me about it. I once sliced my hand opening a can of tuna. Rachel laughed again, twice in one day. She almost didn't recognize the sound. They ate by candlelight. Lila rested on Rachel's lap, listening quietly. For the first time in years, dinner didn't feel like survival. It felt like home. The next morning, Nathan stood by the window, staring out at his half-submerged car. The water was almost gone. Rachel was drying dishes when she heard him sigh. You'll be able to leave soon, she said gently. He didn't answer right away. Then, I don't know where I'd go. She paused. Don't you have family? Not really, he said. My parents passed. I have colleagues, but that's not the same. There was silence. Then he added, I've been offered a job again, out of state, a big project. I said no last week, but now Rachel felt something tighten in her chest. You should take it, she said too quickly. He looked at her. Do you want me to? She didn't answer. Her mind was spinning. This isn't your life, Rachel. This isn't safe. He's a storm, and storms leave. I can help you, Nathan said softly. Help you find work, finish school, whatever you need. But all she heard was, I can fix you. And Rachel had spent too long surviving to be someone else's project. I don't need saving, she said coldly. Nathan blinked, taken aback. That's not what I meant. You think you can just show up, hand me a job, and disappear again? I'm not trying to disappear. Then what are you doing here, Nathan? For a long second, he didn't reply. Then the phone rang. They both turned toward it. Rachel's stomach dropped. She hadn't even heard it get signal again. She picked it up. Hello? A voice on the other end. Calm, stern. Is this the mother of Lila Mendez? You need to bring her in. Now. Rachel grabbed her coat, heart pounding. Lila was asleep again, her cheeks warm, not flushed with fever but still not normal. Nathan didn't ask questions. He was already pulling on his shoes. They rode in silence through streets thick with mud and broken branches. The hospital was packed. patients on gurneys in hallways, the air thick with panic and wet clothing. At the pediatric desk, a nurse led them to a small room where a young doctor examined Lila quickly. "Her fever spiked again," the doctor said. "We need to keep her overnight." "It's precautionary. Pneumonia's been going around." Rachel nodded, but her chest tightened. "She needs rest. I haven't rested in weeks. How do I hold this together one more day?" Nathan placed a hand gently on her back. "I'm staying. You don't have to." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm staying." Hours passed. Lila drifted in and out of sleep, whispering dreams Rachel couldn't understand. At one point, Rachel leaned her head against the wall and closed her eyes, just for a moment. She awoke with a start. The lights were dim, the monitors beeped. Nathan was in the chair beside Lila, holding her hand, softly reading from a storybook he must have found in the waiting room. He looked exhausted, unshaven, lost in the words he spoke, but peaceful. And for the first time, Rachel saw him as something she didn't know she needed, not a rescue, not a storm, but someone who stayed. When the story ended, he looked up and met her gaze. "I used to think I was done with all this," he said, voice low, "with care, with effort, with meaning." Rachel stood slowly, walked toward him. "But I'm not. I just forgot what it looked like." He glanced at Lila's tiny hand in his. "I remembered here." Rachel said nothing. Her throat closed tight. She sat beside him, their shoulders almost touching. "You don't have to say anything," Nathan added. "But I will." He turned to her, expression stripped of every layer. "I don't want to leave. Not the house, not you, not her." Rachel blinked fast. "Nathan, I'm not offering a fix. I'm offering a life, one that starts with learning how to stay, with you." She looked down at their daughter, hers by blood, his by choice. And maybe for the first time in her life, Rachel let herself believe in more. She reached for his hand. "I've spent so long being afraid of people who don't stay," she whispered. "And you scare me. Because I think you actually might." Nathan squeezed her hand gently. "I do." And there, between the hum of hospital machines and the breath of a child who fought her way back from the edge, a woman who had stopped believing in help and a man who had stopped believing in himself chose to begin again, together. 3 weeks later, the neighborhood still smelled of rain, but inside Rachel's small house, there was light again, real, steady, warm. Lila was home, healthy and louder than ever. She danced in mismatched socks across the living room floor, holding the drawing she'd made, a house with 3 stick figures, all smiling. Nathan had built new shelves in her room, painted the walls a soft lavender, fixed the hinges on every door. Rachel had gone to her first interview in months, not for a cleaning job, for an assistant teaching role at a local daycare. She didn't get it. Not yet. But she left the building smiling. Because this time, she had someone waiting for her outside. Someone who looked at her like she was more than someone to rescue, like she was someone worth rooting for. She'd spent years holding everything up alone. Now, when the faucet dripped, there was another set of hands. When Lila scraped her knee, another lap to crawl into. When the night grew heavy, another breath beside hers. Rachel once believed strength meant doing it all alone. But she was starting to learn a different kind of strength. Letting someone in. Letting someone stay. Letting someone love you back. Because sometimes the flood doesn't come to wash you away. It comes to carry in someone you didn't know you needed. Someone who sees you clearly and chooses you anyway. Maybe you've been through a flood too. Not the kind that fills the streets, but the kind that fills your heart with fear, exhaustion, and silence. The kind where you have to be strong because there's no other choice. The kind where asking for help feels like weakness. But what if strength is also opening the door? What if someone is out there not to fix your life, but to sit beside you in the mess, to hold your hand through the night, to say, "You don't have to do this alone anymore"? If this story touched something in you, leave a comment. Tell me, who was the person that stayed when you needed them most? Or were you the one who stayed for someone else? And if you believe in second chances, in unexpected kindness, in love that shows up when we stop looking, subscribe. We still have so many stories to tell.